Thanks for joining me on my Facebook page, Alex Marlow Media. And we've just about to go to a new lead story at Breitbart.com. And this is one that's going to be very disappointing to the left. We got a fact check. Trump does not own stake in a hydroxychloroquine drug maker. Now, there's a lot of hydroxychloroquine drug makers. It's been on the market for a long time, long since this patent has expired for the innovators. And it's now something you can get generic. So lots of companies do it. And there's been a claim that's been going around that Trump had a stake in a major drug maker. This has been echoed across the internet, in particular the Huffington Post, and who had a story that claims President Trump reportedly owns a stake in a company that produces hydroxychloroquine, the anti-malaria drug he is reportedly touted as a coronavirus treatment, even though his experts say there's no strong evidence it works. And again, you see how the way they're writing it, there's tons of anecdotal evidence that it's helpful. And I know the doctors are already putting it into use. Even Andrew Cuomo, the left's hero of the moment, he wants as many pills as he can get his hands on. So has anyone touted it as a cure-all that is a silver bullet that will save us all? No, of course not. But it is something that is one of the few bright spots health-wise in terms of treatments for this global pandemic. And you've got the Huffington Post trying to splash cold water on it, but this is a story that cites a New York Times story where Trump himself has a small financial interest in Sanofi, a French drug maker that makes Plaquenil, the brand name version of hydroxychloroquine. That's the biggest brand there is. Plaquenil, if you hear that, that's you're talking about hydroxychloroquine. John Carney writes the fact check for us at Breitbart News. Trump's personal financial interest, however, does not include a stake in Sanofi, and the New York Times did not claim it did. Instead, Trump's financial disclosures show that his three family trusts each had investments in a $10.3 billion Dodge and Cox mutual fund that owned shares in Sanofi, the world's fifth largest drug maker by prescription sales. As of its latest disclosures, these holdings amount to just 3.3% of the fund's holdings. So this is a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a connection at most. Carney goes on. Trump's most recent financial disclosure forms list holdings in the Dodge and Cox International Fund valued between, get this, $1,001 and $15,000. That means Trump holds a maximum stake in the mutual funds of $35,000, giving him an indirect interest in Sanofi of $1,155 at most. His financial interest in this company, which has a market capitalization of nearly $58 billion, could be as low as $99.10. A lot of credit goes out to Mike Cernovich, who is a friend, and he got this right online first. And Carney goes into more detail. You'll be able to get this at the front page of Breitbart.com. But that is breaking news. This is a story that went ultra viral on the internet all day long. It's been shared over and over and over again that we finally figured it out. The reason why the Bad Orange Man was promoting this mystery drug that no one had ever heard about, even though it's been widely circulated and is used to safely treat other ailments like rheumatoid arthritis and lupus and malaria, etc. It's all about him making money, because that's what it's all about. Trump, the mega billionaire who traded in so much of his personal wealth in order to become president, he could have made 35 grand. So that's it. We've solved it. The mystery of the Bad Orange Man has been solved yet again. I'm Alex Marlow. I'm editor-in-chief of Breitbart.com. I'm also the host of Breitbart News Daily, which is on SiriusXM Patriot number 125 every morning, 6 a.m. Eastern Time. That's midnight Hawaiian. And you can join us live also on the SiriusXM app if you would like to hear from our many wonderful reporters and callers at Breitbart.com. It's a great show. And what I've been trying to do is to interact with more of you, take questions on my Facebook page, and we have a bunch of those today that are lined up. And so let's take them in order. We are taking questions live on my page, Alex Marlow Media. So Dan Seidel writes, maybe Trump is using the pressers for some tension relief. He likes to argue, gives him the chance to blow off anger and turn guns to bear on the media. He's testing the winds, seeking trends, and info through the questions asked ? So Dan is talking about a topic I brought up on radio this morning where I was thinking about how these press briefings that the president has been doing are wearing a little thin for me. I love that the president gets to speak directly to the people, but I love that he is kind of doing an end run around the establishment media where he's backed them into a corner where they can either not carry the president of the United States while he broadcasts live in a global pandemic, which obviously looks cooked, or they could put the cameras on the president and watch him dunk on their correspondents over and over again. The president, of course, is quite good in that format, taking questions from the media. He almost always represents himself very well, and his colleagues in his task force are across the board pretty impressive. There's one or two I don't like quite as much, but most of them are pretty great. So that's been the strategy. But the fact that we're taking now 90 minutes a day of questions from establishment media in a confined briefing room where all of the most important people in the planet, it appears, are put into one small room. No one's got any masks on, and these journalists ask redundant questions, tedious questions, gotcha questions, and then we watch the president dunk on them, which is fine, but I just feel like it's not necessarily the best use of everyone's time, and they're just kind of, I'm getting sick of them a little bit, but I do know why I believe the president's doing them. I think this is his sort of alternate rally. He can't do his rallies, and he has a chance to speak and to get stuff off his chest and to test ideas that work and take challenges. And he usually always wins. He's always better than the media in these circumstances. So very rarely you come away from these press conferences not feeling a little better about things. He does have that presence, and generally either he or his staff has a good answer to most of the questions. The problem is, I don't know why we're not hearing from the citizens. We're not hearing from alternative media. We're only hearing from establishment journalists, and that to me is getting irritating, to say the least. So overall, I get it. I'm still lightly positive on them, but I just love them at the start, and I don't love them as much anymore. All right, Tracy Levy. Stores I normally buy from have their online stores closed. Why are only Amazon and Walmart fulfillment centers getting through? And I asked John Carney, our economic and finance editor, what he thinks of this one. And he said, simply put, that they're just the best logistics companies in the world. It's that simple, is being able to have a model where your business is getting products from the manufacturers to the warehouses, to their distributors, and to your doorstep. That is what they do best. And they have contingency plans, and they've got it all mapped out in a very mathematical way. And that's what makes them so great, is that is really the code that Jeff Bezos cracked with Amazon, is just how to distribute books the most effectively and the most efficiently. I mean, that's it. That's what it is. And I wish there was a lot more detail to it, but you really need to think about who are you comparing it to. There's so few other companies that have the technology or the scale to know that a customer wants something, in Carney's words, that could be 3 miles away and can be delivered in 2 days. They're the only ones who know how to match where the product is with where the customer is and get things to them. It's really a huge mind twister if you try to think about it on your own, to coordinate the delivery people and the warehouse people, the stocking people, and coming up with a deadline for yourself, typically 2 days. And that's what Amazon's the best at it, and Walmart has caught up, I think, a fair bit. So that's why they're going to do okay in this stuff. And not to mention, people think of them when they shop online. It's a trustworthy thing. For me, that I know for the most part, Amazon makes a mistake here or there, but if I'm ordering from them, and I'm not a big Amazon fan, but it is a good product. I know if I'm ordering from them, I'm probably going to get I know I'm going to get basically what I want, and it's going to come in as quick as possible. And that familiarity and dependability, that's what people look to in Walmart and their retail stores. So a big deal there. All right, I'm also getting breaking news. According to CNN, so take that with a grain of salt, but I figure this is true. The acting Navy secretary has resigned after calling the ousted aircraft carrier captain stupid. Now, we've been into this a fair bit with the aircraft carrier captain who had put out a memo for whatever reason, a 5-page memo complaining about conditions on an aircraft carrier going way outside the chain of command. And he has since been disciplined severely. It sounds like the president is going to try to do some mediation on his own. And the acting Navy secretary was harshly critical earlier today. And this was something that really animated anti-Trump Twitter in a major way. So he's resigned. It looks like this is just a very messy scenario. So that is more breaking news for you in the middle of this Ask Me Anything session. We'll keep you posted on that at Breitbart.com. All right, let's continue with some of these questions here. Mark McMahon, I hope I'm getting that right, or Mark McMahon, one or the other. Mark McMahon, we'll go with that. Sorry about that, Mark. Hello, Alex. I thought Dr. Birx seemed more upbeat and optimistic early on, perhaps good cop to Fauci's bad cop. Am I imagining this? And if not, why do you think it changed? I think that there's something to this. I think that there is always a balance in tone. And I've noticed this with Dr. Birx, who's a great communicator. She's one of the best communicators in the whole task force, even though she's a scientist. I've noticed that her tone does change here and there, and I do believe that she has things that she is pushing that she thinks is most important to the public. And for example, now one of her latest kicks is she likes to thank all the modelers. I think the modelers are going to be in the hot seat here. They're going to be under a ton of pressure because the vast majority of these models are already out the window, and almost all of them have overshot what we estimate now will be the total death toll. And because of that, we have shut down basically the United States of America, and they're based off of models that are either going to be not great at best and airballs at worst. So, she is capable of being political, though I find her to be amongst the most trustworthy of the group. But she seemed upbeat and more optimistic early on. I agree. Fauci was much darker early on. Fauci has gotten a little more positive his last two press conferences. I think he makes a lot of adjustments, and I do think she goes off of him a bit. So I don't think you're imagining it. I don't have any evidence really to support it. Though we do know Fauci was the guy back in January who said, don't worry about coronavirus. I'm sure he was just going off of World Health Organization data, which is UN data, which is China data, which is bogus. So then later on, I think he really tried to make up for it a little bit by hyping some of these more extreme models. And now he's back in a more reasonable tone and tenor. And I think Birx is kind of playing off of that a little bit with what she wants to communicate. But again, you can see for yourself at our Facebook page and at Breitbart.com. We've been airing every briefing live, and I don't see any reason where that will stop anytime soon. Okay, next up, Tom Peltier. Any chance we get China to foot the bill for the stimulus bills? I think maybe. There's been a bigger movement now, and we've been talking about this round the clock at Breitbart, to try to hold China accountable. They hold trillions of dollars of our debt, and yet we're going to have to spend trillions more dollars in order to get the economy to recover from a virus that has wreaked havoc not just on our population, but on our economy, that emanates from China and that China lied about for perhaps months. And it's probably still lying about it to this day because they've kicked out so much of the media. So I think they must be held accountable, and I think they must pay, literally pay the American people for what they've done. And there's a very easy way to do it. Cancel a bunch of the debt. It seems very simple, and there is getting more currency. Gordon Chang was talking exactly about this, one of the best China experts in the United States. There's some rumblings in Congress about it, but I haven't seen a big push or a big consensus yet. But I'm optimistic that China will be held accountable, but it's not going to happen unless we, the conservative base, the pro-Trump base of America, gets animated about this, because the establishment media does not even think about China. And in fact, many of them are on the take from China. Many of them have either invest in China or vice versa. Okay. All right. Ann O'Meara, can you please explain the CDC funding cuts Trump supposedly made? Now, this one we've had at Breitbart. This is another one of those talking points where Trump has made an effort to drain the swamp in a big way. And this is where the left is trying to exaggerate something that Trump tried to do in order to come up with some common sense ways to try to trim budgets and try to make it seem as though this is some sort of a epic failure on his part. And there just isn't necessarily It just isn't necessarily, the facts don't necessarily back it up. Like they've been trying to say that Trump fired a pandemic specialist and defunded the CDC. Joel Pollack has gone into detail at Breitbart about this, and he's talked about how it's mostly false. So the specialist who was on pandemics was not fired, he quit. And some CDC cuts were proposed, but not all of them were implemented. So it's not that he didn't want to cut some parts of the CDC, but not all that were implemented. Bloomberg was hammering Trump on this, and he said that one of the greatest problems today, you read about the virus, what's really happening here is the president fired the pandemic specialist in the country 2 years ago, so there's nobody here to figure out what the hell is going on, and he's defunded the Center for Disease Control, the CDC. So we don't have the organization we need. In reality, the pandemic expert, who is Rear Admiral Timothy Zeimer, left the National Security Council, the NSC, voluntarily, and then the National Security Advisor, John Bolton, when Bolton was appointed, he just left, and Bolton disbanded the unit which he was supervising as part of an effort to downsize what was a bloated NSC that was actually leaking a lot of stuff. So a lot of top secret stuff was leaking to the media. Bolton was trying to get it under control. And yes, he wasn't replaced, but Trump is a swamp drainer. So I don't see this as nearly as egregious as the left does. There might be a grain of truth to it, but I don't see it quite as egregious. So Trump also said that he wanted to have cuts, but he hasn't defunded the CDC at all. And the Secretary of Health and Human Services, Alex Azar, had said that a new proposed budget would in fact prioritize the fight against coronavirus. So obviously Trump wants to pump money into this. Whether or not we saw it coming far enough ahead of time to really pump the CDC filled with cash, no one is ever going to believe that Trump spent enough ahead of time. And so this is where Trump is going to be, watch this narrative. This is going to be the narrative the left is going to put out. Simultaneously, the president is going to be too authoritarian and not authoritarian enough. So just note that. Pay attention to this. This is one where they're going to have wanted him to be much more authoritarian, to have expanded the government in some big way ahead of time. And so just pay attention to that. But yes, most of this is just not, it is something that we've tracked a lot of Breitbart, Joel Pollack in particular, and even the AP has said that the Democrats have been distorting the country's coronavirus readiness with this suggestion that the White House budget has seen a steady erosion of CDC grants for state and local public health emergency preparedness, but the decline was set in motion in a congressional budget that predates Trump. So the CDC drawdown, and this is the key point, it's kind of a long answer, but the key point is it was already in motion pre-Trump. Now, did Trump catch it and say, oh, we got to keep funding extra CDC stuff no matter what? No, he didn't add back to it. He's a swamp drainer. But that's a big deal. That's a big deal that the media is way exaggerating that. So a fantastic question. Okay. I am running relatively short on time, so I'm going to skip ahead, which will annoy producer Matt Purdy a bit. But I've got a couple questions coming in live. John Bodie Smith writes, Alex, how do you practice your golf swing with a 2-year-old and a 2-month-old? John, you know the answer to that. I do not practice my golf swing. Master Marlow is now 19. He's 20 months as of yesterday. And I have a 5-week-old Master Marlow Jr., and there is no golfing going on in the Marlow household. I was joking with Amanda House, one of our politics editors and video, one of our heads of our video unit, and I was just saying that the closest thing I've done to golfing the last couple of months is I got a golf magazine in the airport, and I've made it about a quarter of the way through. So yes, it's frustrating time. I'm also dealing with some back injury recuperation that I'm trying to deal with, but it is winter plus coronavirus plus 2 young babies is not a lot of golf time. And I normally live vicariously through the California and Florida swings of the PGA Tour, and I cannot do that now. So I wish I could give you a more interesting answer that I'm sneaking out for 9 holes in the afternoon, but there is no golfing going on in the Marlow household. All right, last one for today. Alex Tantleff How do we get back to work? What would be your plan? Can you outline? So maybe if the White House is listening, they can hear your idea to open the country. That's very nice of you to suggest that would be the case. It's very hard to know because I think we're very committed to the social distancing and the mitigation in the short term. And I think that short term is going to be at least another month. They set the date at April 30th. That's going to be best case scenario to opening things up. But I do think aggressively April 30th, we need to look at areas that are steadily declining and areas that were never hit very hard and might not get hit very hard, start opening those up in a big way and encouraging the social distancing and the hand washing and the not touching of the face, and anything that you need to do to quarantine yourself if you think you're getting sick. But we need to start, I think, regionally opening things up in a big way. And that is something where the media will say, no, you have to do a blanket or nothing at all. Or if the president proposes we're going to wait for a blanket thing, then they'll say we want to have it be a regional thing. Whatever the president says, the media will tell him he's wrong, so he's going to have to fight through it, and typically he does. And so that's a hopeful note to go out on. But I would really take that April 30th date seriously, at least for regional opening up of the United States. I think that's big. And I think for the rest of you, try to just support your local businesses once it's time to go out and spend, because they're really going to be hurting and they're going to need you, and we're going to need each other. All right, that'll do it for me. Thank you so much for joining us, and I will continue to take your questions. So keep them coming in the comment section. We'll use them on the show. We'll use them in future. We will use them in future broadcasts here on Facebook Live and also on our radio show, Sirius XM Patriot. So great stuff. Thanks so much for your participation. I'm Alex Marlow, and thanks for listening.